watching Discovery Dialogues, Conversations at the Edge of Science. For today's special episode, we will take a look at the underlying risk factors of natural disasters in our country, the Philippines. For today's guests, we have esteemed members of the Philippine Academic Society. Gentlemen, could you please introduce yourselves?
Hello everyone, I am Lebron G. Espada and I am a Senior Emergency Management Coordinator in NDRMC, and I graduated in St. Paul's University with a master's degree in Disaster Risk Management.
Hello everyone, I'm Jomarishan A. Carzo. I am a meteorologist at the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Service Administration. In addition to my expertise in meteorology, I specialize in analyzing disaster risk factors. My focus is on risk factors that affect, risk factors such as severity of exposure, gender and family, age, economic status of the country, which we'll be discussing in this talk show. That's all from me.
Good morning, everyone. I am Bryan Clips. We are co-workers, and I specialize in factors which underlie disasters.
Along with our esteemed guests, we also have citizens from our locale. We will be introducing them later along with their very own translator for the convenience of our audience. Now, gentlemen, as we all know, our country, the Philippines, has been racked by many major natural disasters in the past and in the present. Could you please tell me, gentlemen, what are the different elements that are involved in disaster risk?
So, disaster risk has three important elements, such as the number one is exposure, or the elements at risk from a natural or man-made hazard event. For instance, a densely populated city in a seismic zone is highly exposed to earthquake risks. Number two is hazard, a potentially dangerous physical occurrence, a phenomenon or human activity that may result in loss of life or injury, property damage, social and economic disruption, or environmental degradations. Examples like earthquakes, floods, and wildfires. Number three is vulnerability, the condition determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or processes which increase the susceptibility of a community to the impact of hazard. These factors like poor infrastructure, inadequate preparedness, or high population density contribute to vulnerability. That's all.
Thank you for that very wonderful answer, Mr. Lebron. Now, Mr. Carzo and Mr. Lianes, could you please tell our wonderful audience, the factors which underlie these said natural disasters and how these natural disasters are exacerbated in the current socio-economic climate of our country?
Yes, sure. So there are risk factors that are processes or conditions, often development related. They influence the level of disaster risk by increasing level to exposure and vulnerability or using capacity. So first we have the severity of exposure, which measures those who experience disaster firsthand, such as maybe the people living in the area that are hit by disaster, and the people that are in contact with the victims, such as rescue workers and healthcare practitioners. Next, we have gender and family. Now, we all know that gender equality is on the rise, but we have to look at the reality here. Female gender suffers more adverse effects because biologically they are generally weaker than male. That's why they should be secured first in a disaster. Next, we have the children that are, of course, they are immature, they are weak. They don't know what is happening. So, female and children, and also the old people who are weak must be secured in the disaster. Next, we have age. Adults in the age range of 40-60 are more stressed after disasters, but in general, children exhibit more stress after disasters than adults do. This is because children are again more immature than adults. Now we have next the economic status of the country. There are evidence that indicate that developing countries such as our country experience more diverse effects in a disaster. We have a lower capability to cope in disaster compared to first world countries. We can see that during Yolanda, we had to accept a lot of help from other countries compared to first world countries where they really don't need to accept any help. They can handle their own compared to us. So that's all from me, and I will hand the mic to my co-worker.
Moving on to factors which underlie disasters. First is climate change. It can increase disaster risk in a variety of ways, by altering the frequency and intensity of hazard events, affecting vulnerability to hazards, and changing exposure patterns. For most people, the expression climate change means the alteration of the world's climate that we humans are causing, such as burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and other practices that increases the carbon footprint and concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Next is environmental degradation. Changes to the environment can influence the frequency and intensity of hazards, as well as our exposure and vulnerability to these hazards. For instance, deforestation of slopes often leads to an increase in landslide hazard, and removal of mangroves can increase the damage caused by storm surge. It is both a driver and consequence of disasters, reducing the capacity of the environment to meet social and ecological needs. Globalized economic development. It results in an increased polarization between the rich and poor on a global scale, currently increasing the exposure of assets in hazard-prone areas. Globalized economic development provides an opportunity to build resilience if effectively managed. Poverty and inequality. Impoverished people are more likely to live in hazard-exposed areas and are less able to invest in risk-reducing measures. The lack of access to insurance and social protection means that people in poverty are often forced to use their already limited assets to buffer disaster losses, which drives them into further poverty. Poorly planned and managed urban development. A new wave of urbanization is unfolding in hazard-exposed countries, and with it, new opportunities for resilient investment emerge. People, poverty, and disaster risk are increasingly concentrated in cities.
Talking show ba the reading show? Is that a talk show or reading show?
And lastly, weak governance. Weak governance zones are investment environments in which public sectors actors are unable or unwilling to assume their roles and responsibilities in protecting rights, providing basic services and public services, where both weak governance and poorly planned and managed urban development can lead to congestion, pollution, high crime rates, and increased levels of inequality that also results on increased vulnerability to disasters. So,
Thank you for the thoughtful and educated answers, dear gentlemen. Now, for our next segment, we have gathered questions all around the internet from our Twitter account submitted by our very own viewers. Gentlemen, if you may, from user Suntrash1, which of these economic factors affect the rich the most, gentlemen? Which do you think affect the rich the most?
I think the rich are not very affected because they have the capability to, let's say, cope from the disaster. They have money to buy houses again, to rebuild their house, to have food for themselves compared to the poor. So I can say that the rich are not that affected compared to, let's say, the poor people, the impoverished people. So that's my answer to that wonderful question.
Gentlemen, as we all know, feminism and what we call the left wing has been on the rise recently in the Philippine political landscape. Would you say that the people who argue that the men and the women are equal in the face of disasters? Mr. Lebron, do you think men and women are equal in the face of natural disasters?
In my opinion, yes, I do think that men and equal are all affected by these disasters, since disasters does not pick any gender, any type of gender, race, or any religion. Thank you.
Now, for Mr. Bryan. Mr. Bryan, what do you think the government can do to help improve the daily lives and the preparations for our regular everyday citizens?
Well, they should strengthen their governance and they should strengthen their governance and provide the people good services. And
Thank you, dear gentlemen. Now, for our next segment, I'm sure you're all wondering, now, how can we, as the viewer, relate these information to our daily life? That's why exactly our scouting team has found victims of different natural disasters from all over the country and have brought them here to the studio today such that they may share their experiences with us. Sir, could you please introduce yourself, what you do for a living, and your experiences relating to natural disasters within the past few months?
Mayong buntag ngayong tanan. Ako dahil si Aldrin Joseph Real Halibas, taga Upper Aloynaw. Ako ang kapitan dito. Nabahaan gid mig ayaw dito karang pag-ulap. So mga to. Grabe ang baha dito sa mong bukid kay wala gyud.
Mr. Aldrin, would you say that the local LGU has helped your local? Did they notify you in any way prior?
So, ang LGU ba kay nakatabang ba sa inyo sa inyong kaimtang ron?
Nah, grabe gyud wala kay tabang gyud. Kung nakatabang bitaw sila sa amo, ala murag dili kini may tabo kay kung nitabang sila ma-develop among kuan ba? Among purok. Dayon kung nagbaha man gali, nami pang tabang sa mga tao sa barangay ba? Grabe gyud.
Yes, they have not. Thank you.
Mr. Aldrin, would you agree that had you been given enough funds and the proper education for your fellow barangay Upper Luinab citizens, that you would have been fully prepared for the upcoming flood this season?
Kumusta daw?
Wala gid mi natagag tarong nga funds kay lagi naglisod mi karon og kuan cope up sa mga kuan ba disasters, floods nang natabo sa mga then kuan nagatudlo man ko sa kapitan sa akong barangay, nagatudlo ko sa mga tao dito sa barangay pero dili ko siya enough para makuan ba matudluan gyud og taro ang mga tao sa barangay kay kulang gyud mig equipment gyud.
He said he's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Aldrin. Our next guest, rather, our next victim here he is a prolific businessman in the area. He has established himself as one of the pillars of our great community. Could you please introduce yourself, Mr.
Don Juan. Don Humay. Maayong buntag ra sa tanan. Ako dahil si Don Humay, nakapuyo sa Lower Loina. Dato nag-manage ko sa akong humayan. Kauban sa akong mga trabahante kay tigtan-an mo ko sa akong mga trabahante sa kung unsay ilang kahimtang ana. So I was really wondering because when at the time before during 2010 there was a really massive flood, you know, and my agent already called me that there was an upcoming flood, that upcoming bagyo in our area. So I was I was really I was really I was really hurt because I at that time um, I ran out and go to America to do my business, and I left my poor workers there, and I didn't let them notice about the upcoming bagyo. And when I came back, I was devastated of what I have seen because the crop field that I have worked for long years during my lolo and during my father's time, it was all destroyed in just a few weeks. That bagyo, I forgot the name, but it was Bagyong Sininduming. And I was really devastated because that natural disaster was one of a kind to me because it really destroyed my hopes and dreams.
Now, Mr. John Lloyd, you mentioned that after your Humayan had been, excuse my colloquial language, that after your Humayan had been devastated by the flood, that you went to the USA to pursue your business ventures. Tell me, Mr. John Lloyd, why did you pursue your business overseas?
I pursue my business overseas because my mother lives in the USA, wherein I myself, for the love of my mother, I always come back to USA to share my hopes and dreams to her. She is the only family left in my life. That's why I always come back to the USA, even in dire situations. I just can't help myself, even if my father lives in the Philippines, and even if my father lives in the Philippines and my mother lives in the USA. They met. My mother let you everyone here know that my mother and my father had this dream of making a business made from rice, you know. And my mother thought of a place where they could produce a lot of rice and have a lot of people work on those crop fields. So technically, my mom went to the Philippines, and wherein he met my dad, who was still a working student. That is when our production company grew, but I still can't help myself to feel devastated of what I have done because that natural disaster, the Bagyong Sinanduming, it really hurt me because based on my experience, my father actually got hit by a flood before in his early teenage years. And now that I have experienced it too, the change of the climate and this natural disaster that I have experienced, it really hurt me. Thank you.
Thank you for that very long-winded love story, backstory, Mr. John Lloyd. Now, I'm to understand that when you suffered the devastation of the flood here in the Philippines, that you had your family to fall back on in the USA. Would you say that you are privileged, Mr. John Lloyd?
I'm only a normal human being, so I must say humble. Technically, yes.
Now, regarding the statement of Mr. John Lloyd, we we have brought upon one of his employees who was a victim also of the bagyong Sinandoming. Rest in peace. Mister, what is your name? Could you introduce yourself?
Maayong buntag everyone. Ako ay si Andrea Bagiki, farmer sa humayan ni Don Humay. Amor.
Mr. Andriel, buutan ba nga boss si Don Humay?
Siguro usahay.
Katong na bahaan mo, Mr. Andriel. Okay ra yung inyong balay ato, wala ka na nasalanta ato. Imo harang farm nasalanta ay rather imo rang workplace ang nasalanta ba?
Actually, naapil ko among balay ato. Kay among balay tapad raman siya rice fields. So, naapil yun.
That's such a sad story, Mr. Andriel. Would you say, Mr. Andriel, that if you had suffered, rather, you did not, what do you call this? Mr. Andriel, you did suffer from the flood, yes. Did you have anything to fall back on? Did the government help you in any way, offer any sort of assistance? What was the government's reaction and your employer's reaction to your situation? Yes. It seems that Mr. Andriel has requested the assistance of our resident translator, Mr. Antonio Silongkakit. Now, I will reiterate the question for Mr. Antonio. Mr. Andriel, upon your flooding of your house, did you receive any assistance from the government or from your employer?
Katong pagbaha sa iyong balay, nabay natabang ng gobyerno or si Don Humay sa imuha.
Karon, atong saon na atong pagbaha. Nay natabang si Don Humay ato na siya like gihatag gamay nga kwarta para sa huwa. And siguro ang government ato is napod pero gamay lang, anak.
Yes, they have helped me. Thank you.
Would you say, Mr. Andriel, that this help was enough for you?
Kani ba nga tabang kay sapat ba sa imuha?
Sakto siya sa kadyo tra kay nga panahon. Mga isa ka bulan siguro.
Yes. Thank you.
Now, as we have seen, ladies and gentlemen, that the disparity between Mr. John Lloyd and his employee, Mr. Andriel, is very big. You know, Mr. John Lloyd, he suffered from a great devastating pain. He went to the US. But where could Mr. Andriel go? He had nowhere else to go. Now, I know that we as Filipinos have many friends all over the nation, across the pond. And so we have brought on one of the foreign investors in our community, Mr. Judrick. Could you please introduce yourself?
Kawasaki. Arigato for watching today. My name is Judrick Kawasaki. I live from Japan. I came here in the Philippines and manage some of the subdivisions here in Upper Python and in Lower by of the Ocean Pacific. I am, yes, watashi wa Keteketsu Tolo. The subdivision got struck by a lightning, then it got fire, then my house got burned. My income rate go down because my subdivision is my only, isosala kung chicho. My subdivision is my first and peak of my income, which is so burden for me because it got burned into a fire. Not only fire, it got also struck by a typhoon back in 2010. Yeah, as stated by this man, if I don't understand him. Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Judrick, once the fire they had hit your subdivision, what was your initial reaction to your source of income being burned to the ground?
That is my reaction. First of all, because of this burden, my income go down, which is have a hard. Give me a hard life, but my mother teach me to not to. She, my mother told me that to chase my dreams and don't give up, no matter what. So instead of crying the surface because my income got low, I built a bitaw na kuan ko. Nag, 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 Nagtukod bugog lain business dito sa kuan. Kaya ako pag second income ako. So, instead of sticking to my subdivision business, I also have another business which lead me to a slight income that nga nakapatabang ko na ako para nakaangat sa kuwang business ko.
I was not informed, Mr. Chudrik, that you were also a bilingual person, Mr. Chudrik. Maybe you have something else you want to share to the audience tonight, huh?
I have to share that even your houses got burned, build another one and do a business with me. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Chudrik, I'm afraid that not many people in the Philippines can afford to build their own business. Can you say for yourself that if your businesses fail here in the Philippines, that you can go back to Japan?
What?
If your business here in the Philippines, if it fails, can you say for yourself that you have the choice of going back to Japan?
Good morning, Bahoy. I can say that even if my business here in the Philippines, I have an option to go to Japan, but I would rather stay here because I want to help people, especially Asians, Filipinos, my friend. That especially these people beside me, and I want to help Philippines and people here, especially here in Philippines, to have houses and thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful answer, Mr. Chudrik. Now, I'm afraid, my dear audience, that I have been hiding something from you. There has been one amongst you who is not a regular citizen. He is a government official who has been secretly listening to the inputs of our fellow citizens, such that he may relay this and make governmental changes which may help our fellow citizens, such as Mr. Andriel. Could you please stand up and introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andalan. I am a spokesperson, and I will speak on behalf of the government.
Mr. Lumasag, has the experience of our fellow citizens affected you in a profound way?
Of course, it has affected me very much because I once experienced their hardship, and I don't want them to, and I want them to I want them to live an easier life.
Now, as I am to understand, Mr. Lumasag, you have been, please come with me to the center of the stage. Thank you. As I am to understand, you have been taking inputs from their experiences and have been writing down the possible ways that you, as an extension of the Philippine government, can help our Filipino citizens. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you please tell us the things that you have written down?
Alright, so we all know that floods are one of the most disastrous disasters in our Philippines. So in order to prevent such disasters is we need to implement some specific techniques or techniques. So first and foremost is we need to have a better urban planning. So we have to avoid building infrastructures in flood-prone areas, and we need to construct or implement green infrastructures that can absorb water. The next is the improved drainage system. So we all know that the reason why the water stays in the area is because the water has nowhere to go. So we are planning to implement the drainage system that is efficient enough to drain the water in the certain areas. The next is the flood defenses. So we have to construct or reinforce flood defenses such as dams and dikes. And we also need the early warning systems. And just like our victims, since some of them are not informed about the incoming flood, so they were affected. So we need to have something that can alert them that a flood is incoming, or not just flood, or a disaster is coming. The next is the community education. So for the community education is that people should know what the flood risks are. So in fact, one of the main causes of flood are the trash. So I encourage the people to not put trash, especially in flood-prone areas. And they also need to learn about the evacuation procedures in order to prevent them from being affected by the flood. And that's all.
Thank you for that insightful answer, Mr. Lumasag. I'm very touched by the answer because he has told us that we cannot improve the state of the nation through the government's actions alone. It is through the united actions of the government and us as citizens which can help improve the lives of our fellow citizens. We are not all like Mr. John Lloyd or Mr. Chodrick who can go overseas when times are hard. Some of us have no choice but to stay here and tough it out. I am very thankful that we have brought you here such that we may hear insights from the government. Thank you, Mr. Lamasag. You may return to your seat. As a closer, let us all bow down our heads and remember those who have perished in natural disasters. Let us not forget that the lives that have been lost are very dear to us all. We are very, what do we call this? Lucky that these gentlemen right over here, they are still with us to share their experiences and wisdom today. I have been your host, Rob Thomas, and this has been Discovery Dialogues. Thank you.